Hello, and welcome to this RSA Conference virtual session, the Information Security Skills Gap and How We'll Overcome It. I am your host, Brenna Dobbins of RSA Conference. During the session, all participants will be in listen-only mode. At the close of the presentation, we will conduct a question and answer session. Throughout the presentation, if you have a question, please use the chat feature, which is located in the lower left corner of your screen. As a reminder, this session is being recorded. Following the session, you will receive a follow-up email containing a link to the video replay. The replay will also be posted to rsaconference.com. Today's presenters are Dan Lohrmann, Chief Strategist and Chief Security Officer at Security Mentor, Inc., and John McCumber, Director of Cybersecurity Advocacy at ISC Squared. I would now like to turn it over to John and Dan to begin the session.
Well, thank you, Brenna. Appreciate that very much. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today at this RSA virtual session. It's a real honor to be here with you today. My name is John McCumber. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Advocacy North America for ISC Squared. And you know, when I had an opportunity to cover this subject, there's only one person that I thought of that needed to be with me on this one. Let me switch the slide, take a look here, and that is my colleague and friend, Dan Lohrmann, Chief Strategist and Chief Security Officer for Security Mentor. Dan?
John, you're too kind. It's great being with you again. John was always the go-to guy for us for many years when I was Michigan Chief Security Officer. But my background is with the National Security Agency, and I was in England with Lockheed and Mantech. Managed a lot of different security teams over almost over 2 decades. And it's great to be with you today, John.
Well, thank you, Dan. It's appreciate being here. Let's jump into this topic because this is exciting. What we want to talk about is this workforce gap that I know many of you have heard about. This is something that we're being challenged by. There's a lot of clickbait that's out there in the media and on the web. So we want to sit there and talk about specific empirical data that we at ISC Squared have gone out and researched, gone out and grabbed this information so we can talk about it with a much more focused look at what's going on in this environment. So rather than just hearing it from your friends, rather than reading something that somebody filtered through something they heard, let's talk about what are some of the empirical results of surveys that we have done at ISC Squared, what the impact is to you, and we'll be happy to take questions through this presentation. We also want to cover some anecdotal evidence that you might have heard about. So let's talk about, right here, the workforce gap. And we also have done a survey not only to understand what this gap is from an employer standpoint, but what is it from a job seeker standpoint. And we're going to cover some really interesting information for that as well. We ultimately want to use this data not just to sit there and throw out numbers and things that may not have a lot of meaning for you, but we want to talk about the importance of trying to improve the environment for both job seekers and organizations. What are the takeaways? And then finally, we're going to end and talk about questions. So jumping right into this, we want to talk about where this originally began. We started filtering out this information out of last year's Global Information Security Workforce Study. We're going to cover this briefly, but then we will build up and talk about some more recent research we did for job seekers, and then give a little bit of a preview of our 2018 survey that's just come in. We're just trying to filter the results, and we think this is going to be really significant for you. This report, we do a biannual study. We released one in 2004. We worked this study with Frost & Sullivan, and it's the largest study of this information security profession. There's a lot of people here. So when we talk about empirical numbers, we're not talking about, just interviewing 3 or 4 people we know. We're talking nearly 20,000, and this isn't just ISC Squared. These are non-members as well, and security practitioners, people in the field, people in IT, and others that are influenced or impacted by what's going on in the workforce environment. We've all heard the number, and here it is again. We see a shortage of 1.8 million information security workers. Dan, does this make any sense, or is this just media hype?
No, it's right what I'm hearing, and it's a scary number. It's a big number, but it's absolutely one that it's a global number. It's really the trend that we're seeing out in really as I travel around. there's a big gap, and this number kind of reconfirms that. So yeah, I mean, I'm hearing the same thing as I talk to people wherever I go. There's a shortage.
Well, what we want to point out too, this is a global shortage. So sometimes people look at this and say, this is just the United States, and that's not the case. One of the great opportunities we have at ISC Square is we have a membership of nearly 140,000 people within just that are members of ISC Squared. And then, of course, we're only a subset of the much larger IT security workforce and others that work in information technology, industrial control systems, and the Internets of Things. One of the things that's been addressed and we keep struggling with is how do we address barriers to entry? One of the challenges that we face all the time at ISC Squared is we want to bring more members under the tent. We think we provide an extremely valuable service, helping people get certified, having something on their resume that they can take with us and with them throughout their career. And they can build their career off this framework that the organization certifications provide. We also have certificates that people get, work very hard so they can get certified, whether through Cisco, ISACA, or other organizations that identify skills that members have. So we have to address, when we talk about this gap, there's a broad spectrum. Of course, cybersecurity is a multidisciplinary profession that we have here, and it's important to remember this isn't just pen testers, people that work in SOCs, and people who do vulnerability research. There are people that work in identity and access management, governance, compliance, physical security married with cyber and IT security. Dan, what other areas do you see that you want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you talk about barriers to entry, you know, it's certainly a challenge for people really from all ages. So it's not just people coming out of high school and college. We're going to talk about some education programs that are underway now, and you're starting to see kind of a pipeline of young people in school and things. But you often hear people say, I want to see experience. I want to see people who have hands-on experience. And so more and more programs are starting. We'll talk about solutions a little bit later. More and more programs are offering internships and hands-on. But a lot of times people, and you start seeing that big number, it's like, I want 2 years experience, I want 3 years experience. And I think that's a huge challenge that we see out there. Everywhere I go, as I talk to CISOs around the world, the challenge of people who have actually done this before, who have experience doing it, and I think that's where the skills gap really is at the forefront. So we'll talk about some solutions to that a little bit later as we get towards the end of the presentation. But that hands-on experience is one of the biggest barriers to entry that I keep hearing.
That's a great point, Dan, and that's and occasionally some people will take shots at us and even say, "Hey, ISC Squared, people are asking that I have a CISSP out of college or out of my technical school or the like," and that's not what we set up to do. That's not what our certification is about, because we require experience, a broad capability and understanding of the entire profession. So it's important, something we battle all the time is to work with hiring managers, organizations that are looking to acquire this talent, and in fact, even the federal government, which I've been involved with quite a bit lately, in understanding what roles they need to fill, understanding what the requirements are for those roles, and how to develop focused and accurate position descriptions. I know from anecdotes, and I know Dan's going to be able to tell you 100 of these too, we all see those job descriptions that lay out the requirements for somebody as if they were a global CISO. What they're really looking for is a senior, security technician or architect, what they want to pay at intern wages. And so we work really hard with organizations to help them develop much more effective job descriptions, position descriptions, understand the knowledge, skills, and abilities of the people they're looking for. And by doing that, we can help knock down some of these barriers, because cybersecurity isn't a job you get into just after you get out of college or after you have a certain amount of years in IT. Really, anybody who works with this technology now and does it as part of their job has a security role and function. If you work in IT, you're a systems administrator. If you work in IoT and you're a developer for, appliances or gym equipment and something, and you have this requirement to understand what are the security implications of your IP addressable environment. And so understanding this and helping make more people part of this conversation is important. Let's talk briefly now about that, how to hire and retain talent. This is a 2018 Insights and Trends. This is a much more focused. This isn't that 20,000 people survey we did in 2018 for global workforce. These we went specifically to talk about people who had cybersecurity as their primary responsibility. This was done only in North America, and we completed this survey just last December. This was an independent blind survey. What do I mean by that? We weren't out there advertising ourselves as ISC Squared, and we just didn't advertise our membership. We did that so we could understand what the job seekers were looking at. So we have this gap, and there are two camps on either side of this gap. On one side, you have the employers that have the jobs and the requirements, and on the other side are men and women who are looking to get into this career field or looking to change their position within this career field, and that's why this is so important. People that are job seekers, they have requirements too, just as if the people that need to fill these positions, men and women that want these jobs have these perceptions of it. They want to be taken seriously. They want their opinions to count. They want to be able to protect people and their data, and they want an employer that has a strong code of ethics. And let me just say something a minute on ethics. There's a lot of organizations that give you can get a certificate or you can get training and you can come out, but you're not necessarily signing up to a code of ethics. Like doctors, like attorneys and lawyers, we believe ethics is an important part of our career field as well. Dan, do you have any insights on that?
Absolutely. I mean, integrity, through the years that I've been a CISO and a leader in the security industry and the teams I've been a part of, trust is huge. I mean, because if someone has all the skills in the world and they're a great hacker, if you will, if they're, working against you, if you don't have that trust level, if you don't have that code of ethics, and then you see that in real life every day and the person builds that trust, the person could be a bad actor, could be working for the other side, or it could be an insider threat. So, I mean, I think, a strong sense of ethics and integrity, a code of ethics, having that as part of, trusting your peers, working in teams, that team environment is a huge, huge piece of all the successful teams that, I was in the state of Michigan. We had our Bat Cave, our Security Operations Center. It was all about, having that teamwork, having a sense of integrity and a strong sense of code of ethics. Absolutely affirm, these numbers as being a high important factor for people.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And again, picture the gap, and what I'm going to ask you out here today as we're talking about this is feel free to picture a gap, like you're looking at a valley between two hills. And on one side is the employer with their position descriptions, and on the other side are people looking to either change where they are working, get a new job, get a new opportunity, and people looking to break into the field. And one of the things that we do at ISC Squared as part of this is that, we reach out specifically. I'm a veteran. I also believe in reaching out. We have training special programs for veterans, retraining workers, underserved communities, and others. There are still people in this great country that are looking for work and opportunity. We firmly believe that with the right kind of training and pointing people in the right direction, we can start to fill those gaps with people who want these good-paying jobs and opportunities. Let's go look at a few other numbers real quick. You know what's always interesting? I mean, there's many years ago, probably 2 decades ago now, there's a Harvard Business Review study that determined that salary isn't always the biggest motivator. And we, our survey kind of backs it up. A plurality of people said, well, they want the best salary, but that always isn't important. And that's important for organizations hiring to understand. If you listen to the media and listen what's out there in a lot of articles that you'll see is that people like in government or the public sector don't feel that they compete against the salaries of the private sector. But it's important to understand that not everybody is looking just for that salary upgrade. Approximately 40% of people are currently satisfied with their current salary. And as that Harvard Business Review study revealed, that once people reach an important salary position where they can take care of their family obligations, their mortgage, and the like, that they are not always just looking to get a few extra dollars every month, but they're looking for an opportunity to enhance their skills, get trained others. And we're going to talk about what some of those currently are. One of the things that people came up and they wanted to ask, would you work at a place that already had a breach? And of course, the answer is, well, that's, if you'd say no, that kind of severely limits where you're going to get a job. And it's always understanding that breaches do occur, even in organizations that feel that they're well prepared for them. And it's not a matter of just prevention. It's not security avoidance or risk avoidance. It's risk management, being able to manage them. But that number increases dramatically, though. So, hey, was it responsibly disclosed? And why is that important? That talks to and specifically addresses that ethics issue. Dan, do you have any comments on these numbers?
No, I agree. I think this is really important. I want to throw something else in there. Back on the last slide real quick, John, is you were talking about salary and benefits. If you could just jump back. I think one of the things that'll be interesting to see as your survey goes forward in 2018 and 19 as we move forward over the next 2 years is I'm seeing more and more people out there maybe even taking a lower salary but want those stock options, because there's been a lot of stories. I wrote a blog about recently about Tenable going IPO, initial public offering, and some different cybersecurity companies that are doing really well. Duo Security in Michigan, here where I'm at, was bought by Cisco. And so people even taking smaller salaries, but looking at that stock piece and ownership, and then obviously kind of gold at the end of the rainbow. So I do think that's something that is out there with millennials and young people. We'll have to see where that goes. I know this was done end of 2017, and I'm going to be interested to see how that plays in, especially with the stock market kind of booming right now and maybe near all-time highs. Of course, if we have, I know in government we always said, in the nonprofits, you can't, you don't have that piece of it. So it'll be interesting for me to see where that goes in the future. But I certainly agree that, as you were mentioning, the integrity, the breach question, the next one, I think that makes a lot of sense. People want to know that things are being handled responsibly, and I just echo those comments as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. To appreciate. Yeah, and that, understanding the full picture of what your compensation is. And I've always looked through my career. Part of my compensation is the education, training, and skills growth that I can get in my current position. I'm not put in a box. I'm not told that I can't grow outside that box or anything, because it's part of this, especially in this business we're in. The ability to keep up with the technology changes, keep up with the emerging threats, as well as the new safeguards and technologies, and just this entire avalanche now of new technology that all has a security component to it is going to become critical. And we talked about this and the ethical challenges of that. This is another plurality, but again, people want to go where others are, where the organization understands the importance of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of their critical assets, and they want a company that invests in that. It may be in technology, but obviously the key place to invest is in the people, the men and women who provide that risk management perspective for your organization. And of course, 40%. Hey, you know what? This is like becoming the NFL coach for the Cleveland Browns, baby. You want to make sure you're in a place where you're going to make an impact, and so people for the most part aren't scared away from a place that needs to improve their security. In fact, that's a really strong opportunity to learn and grow with an organization, and we identified this in this study as well. So what are people really looking for? What are their top priorities? And I have them listed for you right here on this slide. Look at this. Training, certification, way up at 88%. And like I said, I take jobs, and I've been fortunate in my jobs. I've looked and endeavored to find places that would support me in my growth potential for my career. Continue to move that career left to right and continue to increase your knowledge, skills, and abilities. People want to have their employees, and in fact, that's a culture, what we call the culture of cybersecurity in that organization, so that they train their employees as well. Clear job descriptions. Lord, Dan, I bet you and I have been sitting on these job boards for a while. Could talk some war stories about there, can't we?
Absolutely. No, this is a great. I love this slide because people absolutely want a career path that they really want to think about. I love the Wayne Gretzky line. I'm going to skate to where the puck is going to be, but really kind of thinking about your career in terms of a marathon, not just kind of a sprint. I love this because knowing clear job descriptions, investing in tech, being in a culture where you can make a difference. All the things you said, John, I just want to confirm that. I know in my career, and I have a lot of time in public sector, and I think that's one thing. That work-life balance is a piece for a lot of people, especially a lot of millennials. But I also think, being able to know that they're growing, and for the long term, they're going to have not just, for this year or next year, but really cybersecurity. I know it's going to be around for the rest of our lives, John, and I think people really want to be thinking about their career and really constantly, just as we don't have everyone had an iPhone 1, iPhone 2, iPhone 3. If I ask everybody to raise their hand and say, how many of you have an iPhone 2 or 3, nobody would raise their hand. Just did that at a conference last week. But the reality is everyone's, they want the latest technology. Technology is constantly changing. The threat landscape is constantly changing. The Internet is constantly changing. It'll be constantly growing and evolving. And so people need to keep those skill sets up. And so I just echo everything you have on this slide. I think it's so important, and people know what they're getting themselves into with the clear job descriptions and investing in the latest security technology. So I think this is a great slide.
That's great, and I want to point out to everybody who's with us today, you were part of the solution to this. If you see these, call people out, whether it's in your own company, an organization, or somebody else. If you see these nebulous what we call unicorn job descriptions, and say, help me understand what skills, knowledges, and abilities I need to be able to perform this function. Whom are you looking for? Are you looking for somebody very specific? What job does this person need to perform? And then we'll be much more effective at filling this gap. Let's make it clear. It seems, like a lot of, we used to joke doing consulting for the government that sometimes government agencies seem to want to pay by the pound for reports. And this is the same thing with job description. It's like, whether or not an HR organization or something are putting together these job descriptions, they seem to want to throw everything in there and be able to say that without refining that, without a true, if you read a lot of these job descriptions, I don't even know what the job is. Every job sounds like you have to be the expert on everything, and we know that's not the case. So how do we best do that? And we're asking you to join us in dealing with that. We're doing that. And what do we see as the disconnect in these numbers that we've looked at today? Let's talk about that briefly, and we can talk about solutions. Well, we need to start tapping new talent pools. That's been obvious. I've had the privilege now in this role of meeting with the Department of Labor, state of Massachusetts, the state of Maryland. I'm working with my home state of North Carolina. The governor is going to announce a new initiative on the 11th of November to reach out specifically here for veterans. The state of Virginia has already put nearly 300 veterans into their cybersecurity program, and we're helping those men and women get jobs today. We're doing that for underserved communities, and again, retraining workers. This is a great place to be. You don't need a bachelor's degree just to get started. There's so many opportunities that we want to knock down these barriers and reach a broader talent pool. Obviously, we want to reach out to people who historically have not had the opportunities or that to jump into these careers. We're making those available as we try to open the doors, working with community colleges, even high schools, and being able to provide a career path for people to get here at ISC Squared. We pioneered. We have associates now. You don't have to have your experience yet. You don't have to have all this degree, or you don't have to have years of experience. You can just jump in and start your career with the opportunity to learn from people like a Dan Lorman or others, where you can then build your career. So that's going to be critical. We're going to fill that skills gap, but this is going to be critical to do that. Dan?
Yeah, there's so many things I could say about this. I mean, I want to tell one quick story, John. I had an employee back.
Please.
This goes back now 12 years. I'm not going to give you his last name, but his name was Mike. He actually was at Michigan State University. Was a passionate student. He brought passion and didn't have a lot of experience, but he really knew he wanted to be in the cybersecurity. And actually, he kept knocking at our door, and I kept saying, "We're not hiring students right now. We're not hiring students right now." You know, I kind of at that time had kind of a closed mind around it. The guy just kept coming back. Finally, I said, "Okay, we'll hire you. You have to work for free." And I found out later it wasn't even allowed by HR. We quickly had to remedy that, but brought in, actually worked for us for a year as a student, hired him full time. He was really persistent. He great attitude around all these same topics you just went over. You know, he wanted to learn, thirsting knowledge, going to conferences, constantly getting certifications, really growing his skill set. And over about 3.5, 4 years, he grew into be one of our top employees. Ended up leaving the state of Michigan government. He's now 3 jobs later, making more than $500,000 a year, doing really, really well. But I guess the moral of the story is, you know, even when you're approaching this, if you're coming at this, you're listening to this webcast today, and you maybe don't have those skills. I mean, I would really say be persistent, work hard. There's plenty of opportunities out there, and even like I was the CISO at the time. Now we expanded our program later, and we brought in a lot of students and others, and we built kind of a pipeline, a farm system, if you will, for talent. But at that time, you know, he was persistent, and he actually became a rock star. He's one of the best people working at top security company now. So I just encourage people to really go for that. We also had people who came in from other professions. We saw around government, people from system administration, people from non-cybersecurity where that wasn't their core function, that wasn't really the main part of their job, but maybe they were a database administrator or they were a system administrator, and they went in and they got cybersecurity skills, they got certifications, they used some of their technical background, and they came over and they joined the cybersecurity team. So we got a lot of people where we had those huge gaps and we couldn't find qualified security people. We brought them in from other parts of the organization, even the business side of the organization, without maybe they were tech savvy, but they didn't have a lot of specific skill sets, got some certifications, got some opportunity, and we brought them in. They became some of our best people because they were able to kind of navigate through the business side of cybersecurity and do a translation for us in communication. So building those teams, you know, really, we need all types of people to help fill that huge gap.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great point. You don't have to be the wizard with the tech chops today. You have to have the opportunity, you know, the zeal for this field. There's a lot of ways into this field. Like I say, we need people that understand governance, policy development, implementation. We need, you know, people as well as these men and women that do the vulnerability research, work in SOCs and do penetration testing. There's a whole spectrum of skill sets. One of the challenges that I've addressed to a lot of people I've worked with, I taught at George Washington University in the graduate program for a number of years, and I always had students that came to me and go, "This is fascinating coursework. I'm taking coursework in what we now call cybersecurity, and I want to know how I get into this field." One of the bits of advice I used to give all the time was, "Where do you work now?" And a lot of these men and women, again, this is around Washington, said, "Well, I work for Booz Allen, or I work for Northrop Grumman or Raytheon." I said, "You know what? They do cybersecurity in these organizations. What I encourage you to do is find out who does it. You know, get yourself, just like that guy that bugged you, Dan, bug that man or woman that runs that organization. You talk to them and tell them you're going to work for them for free at night. I just want to tag along and learn what you guys do." And put yourself in that role. And I've been gratified over the years to have a number of these people come back to me and goes, "That was the ticket. I started off just offering to tag along because I said, hey, I'm taking a course. Here I want the opportunity to understand how you guys do this professionally." They start doing that. Next thing you know, now they've got great careers and they've got a great opportunity, and they found out they actually like this work. And you know what? This is what I was just talking about. Look at here. I mean, you know, I came at this business through IT. That's how I got into it first. I used to run data centers for the Air Force. And then I came into the security field. Now, back then, this was fun. My IT colleagues looked at me and they said, "John, you're being a fool getting into the security angle of this, because in 10 years, nobody's going to care about IT security but a couple of three-letter agencies around Washington. That was the career advice I got. So I just want to caution you all out there, you're going to get that same career advice, but don't listen to it. You charge on, and look at this. 24% of our workforce have non-IT or computer degrees, and 1 in 5 moved into cybersecurity from a completely different sector. We need everybody, and we need all kinds of multidisciplinary skills. So don't look at whatever you're doing today and say, well, that's where I got to be. If you're interested in this field, now's the time to jump in. This gap is nothing but screams opportunity for people, and that's what I hope you get from this slide. What are the takeaways from all this stuff we've been talking about? Well, right now we have job mobility. Understand that that's not absolute. Dan and I can both give you anecdotes of men and women we know who are kind of struggling or maybe between jobs and just haven't found the right opportunity. So don't take that as an absolute. It's not assumed that you can just pack up your cybersecurity toolkit, walk down the street for a 20% upgrade in salary and be able to take your dog to work. There's a lot more of that going on, and it depends obviously a lot about the region you work in. Recruiters actually make money and do great things when they have a churn. So they benefit too by keeping the churn going. You know, it's a lot of people you might see on social media or cybersecurity, and I'll use my air quotes here, rock stars like to complain about recruiters or others, but they perform a vital function for us, and they help try to maintain the churn for their own benefit. But obviously that benefits salaries, career growth, and opportunities for people as well. We know what job seekers are looking for now. We've talked about that. What do they look for employer? And we've talked a bit about the employer. It's really not about the money. It's about the program. So if you're an employer and you want your organization to succeed in this talent war, you're going to have to make sure that you have an environment that supports cybersecurity. As a consultant, I used to be able to walk in and understand an organization's cybersecurity culture pretty quickly. In fact, a lot of times within hours, and if not, just a couple days. And all you have to do is see how people treat critical information, how they manage things like their workstations, their work environment, what the developers and others do on an ongoing basis that address those security concerns. And here's just, I need to cover this. I'm going to want to turn it over to Dan for a minute, but I wanted you to talk about this. Every one of my students, everybody I talked to for a long time, you're not a scapegoat and you're not an enforcer in cybersecurity. You're merely an advisor. And I mean that even if you're working inside an organization at a corporate level. You go in, your job isn't to enforce those policies. Your job isn't to hammer employees that click on malicious links. Your job isn't to be the guy that gets dragged out and shot when there's a breach. You advise, but then what we're doing is giving those risk metrics to leadership, and leadership should be taking on those roles, understanding that their role is to accept, mitigate, or transfer the risk, and your job is to identify that and salute with their decision, and that's going to make for an effective career for you. Dan?
No, I echo that, John. I mean, I think the number one reason security pros fail is that they become kind of Dr. No. They always kind of say, we can't do this, can't do that. Somebody wants to do something innovative in the company, some new business function, some new system, some new program. It's like the security guys veto it. And I almost lost my job early in my CISO career for saying no all the time. I was the guy who didn't want to do Wi-Fi, and Terry Takai, who became the CIO in Michigan, became the CIO in California, then CIO for Department of Defense, taught me, you got to get to yes. And, they're putting in Wi-Fi at Chrysler, Ford, Dow, and GM. So, what do they know that you don't know? So that was like 14 years ago for me. But I see that in a lot of security pros, they need to be enablers, and I think they can be enablers, give a range of options, really thinking in terms of, we talk about gold, silver, bronze, offering multiple solutions that are going to enable security. Cybersecurity should be an enabler of better innovation, a better technology, and you're absolutely right. The security profession, gives a range of solutions, understanding the risk of different solutions, and really being part of that. And I think security pros really need to have that kind of mindset. And I certainly, this chart so many things I could say about this, but, I want to echo that you really want to be thinking in terms of it is a career. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I think, being in an environment where, and a lot of times I say in public sector jobs where there maybe isn't the high pay, but you maybe get a range of different opportunities to grow in your career, to try different things. I think we had a lot of people from those early years when I was Michigan CISO. We look back and I can count, almost a dozen people now that are CISOs around the country that started in different roles. That came to us from different perspectives and different backgrounds, but they grew their skill set over the years. They kind of enlarged their perspective, and they got really involved in the industry, and they really kind of grew. And someone wanted to be kind of managers, someone wanted to be more of cyber experts in some specific area, like forensics or some other type of incident response. But I think, the reality of it is that, really this slide talks about it's not just about the money. It's thinking in terms of your career and really growing your skill set, and then the opportunities are going to come at you. And I really believe that. I think, we are in a market right now where there does seem to be almost like the free agency market. If you really have a lot of great skill sets, almost like in sports, the top paying, the Kirk Cousins quarterback guy who got that job. But those are the extreme examples. But I think if you just think about your career in terms of being an enabling security pro, growing your skill set, and really follow this process that you guys have uncovered here in this survey, I think you can really grow a great cybersecurity career and following in the footsteps of John McCumber and all you've done, John.
Oh, it wasn't me. Believe me, Oscar Wilde once said, experience is what most people call their mistakes. And so I guess I have a lot of experience. But, yeah, that's exactly right. I work out every day is my focus is, A, to support our membership primarily, but then the profession as a whole. And it's all about knocking down these barriers and helping people. We want to, as part of this also, like you said, what Dan is saying here, want to encourage you. As a young woman came to me in 1995, and she said, hey, I'm kind of interested in what you guys are working on over here. She was actually in charge of our spreadsheets and finances for the organization I work for. She's a financial analyst, graduate of Goucher College near Baltimore, and a very talented young woman. And so we said, hey, why don't you just come, after you're done with your duties, come and sit with us. We'll start showing you. And then and sure enough, after several months, we were able to start putting her on engagements. She grew her skill set, and last I saw, she was at Citibank as an assistant vice president, earning a lot more than I make. And it's just really gratifying to see that and realize that. So if you're an experienced person on this call today, I'm going to ask you to make sure you're doing your part to mentor and bring the next generation along, and to make sure these people have an opportunity to earn a lot more money than you do. And it's really an important thing for us to do right now, because we're all responsible at this cybersecurity gap. It's not just what I'm doing or Dan's doing, it's what all of us do. And we're all responsible for filling this gap. And we think there's a great, by taking a look at these, we'll give you a better perspective of what the gap is, who's on one side of the gap and who's standing on the other. And then we'll help to put in the bricks and the various pieces that are going to fill in that chasm that exists between the hiring organizations and hiring managers and the men and women that want to become part of our profession. At this point, I'm going to kick this over. Yeah?
I was just going to say, before we jump to questions real quick, I just want to underline one thing you said real quick, just for 1 minute. Mentoring. I mean, everyone on the call, if you're interested in this, find a mentor or be a mentor or both. I mean, I've done all the above. We helped establish a mentoring program with the Multi-State Information Sharing Analysis Center, the MSISAC, among CISOs around the country. But whether they're junior people, and literally, I've had the opportunity to mentor people even other side of the world, online from Europe and all over the United States. But other people I know, just people doing more of it than I am, and I just encourage people to really, have those conversations. Find a good mentor. There's a wide variety of ways to do that. We could probably do a whole other talk just on how to be a good mentor and how to find a mentor and that whole topic, John. But I really think mentoring is a huge piece of this. Because people have gone before you who have practical experience, whether that be in Washington, inside the Beltway, or anywhere around the country, or anywhere around the world, we're all in this together, and it is a global set of challenges we're facing as cyber threats. We need to be working together, partnering together, and mentoring. So I'll let you go to questions now, but I just really think mentoring is a really important piece of the pie.
Yeah, Dan, absolutely. Just to echo that, like I say, I agree too. So I challenge our members. Look, if you're a CISSP, CSL, an SSCP, or one of our other CAP, one of our certifications, you have you have a moral obligation to help build a field. This is a great opportunity to reach out and to ensure that you're meeting with people. I'm lucky in that I have the opportunity to go out and speak to a lot of people. We have our big national conference coming up here in October. Before that, I'll be in Toronto at Sector speaking to a group of young men and women there and people looking to get in the field. And so I get the opportunity to reach out globally to people looking to get in this field. I have the opportunity to encourage them to do that. But I can't, I'm one person. So I have to rely on my colleagues and our members and other people in this career that you have an obligation to help somebody else and to reach down, lift somebody else up the ladder, and do that. I've been privileged to be able to do that for people, and it's a wonderful feeling. It's important, and it's a professional requirement that we all have. That being said, I see somebody's asking me about thoughts on DevSecOps. I mean, that's an emerging field here, and then, how they define that and how they put parentheses around what DevSecOps is still emerging. It's an interesting and fascinating element of what we do. And other than that, I'm not sure what specific thoughts that you'd like. But if you want to qualify that, let me know. But right now, I think it's a fascinating thing. This is an emerging field. And what's interesting? Let me just share with you before we turn it all over to questions. I just received a survey from a government organization, and they're dealing with this at the national level. And they wanted my opinion on how do you keep people current with this dynamic threat? And I said, and the answer I'm writing to them is on my laptop right now. That's my project I'm working on today. I said, if you base what you're doing on threat, you're always going to be behind. You need to get ahead of the threat. By doing that, you have to have a process that deals with technology, with your policies, as well as the people factor, what we call human factors. So if you're in security, you got 3 levers to pull here, folks. You don't have just one. It's not just a vulnerability safeguard, threat change, forever, because that you will always be behind. You need to be able to put out a program that has the ability to understand as the evolution of threats, factor that into your risk planning, and then create creative solutions that use people, policy, as well as technology. That being said, I'm going to jump off my soapbox. Dan, any final thoughts?
Well, I don't know where they're going with a DevSecOps question. Like you said, there's a lot of ways we can go, but I'm just, I've certainly encouraged people. If you look at even DevSecOps.org out there, you see, what's the manifesto there, and I'm not sure if they represent, what that stands for or not, but I certainly don't disagree with anything on this page. Leaning in over always saying no. Data and security, science over fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So, certainly you and I would agree with, we need to get to yes. We FUD and that kind of world, mandates, and just checklists, aren't going to give you the level of cybersecurity that you want. So those kinds of things, and really being involved with testing and making sure stuff is secure, I certainly support that. I won't go more into that. I don't know if the person had more questions around what they specifically wanted us to say about DevSecOps, but certainly I think, creating an environment. I just want to say one other thing about this whole field, and I think more and more, John, I'm seeing, really we need people who can grow into, as teams, be team players. This is not just you're out on an island by yourself, trying to protect the island, if you will. If you're on an island, you will fail in cybersecurity. And so we have to work together, partnering as organizations, partnering with ISC Squared, partnering with different, organizations around the training side of things, but also working with the federal government, state governments, working around incident response. If we, God forbid, had a major 9/11 kind of incident or Pearl Harbor or any major incident, blackout, any kind of critical infrastructure failure, it's going to be an emergency. We talk about my experience in government. We talk about all hazards. So just like we responded to the hurricane just now with Florence, and you're down there in North Carolina, you had that firsthand. Your house was hit. The reality is that we need to be thinking about before, during, and after incidents. How are we going to be responding? And like we said, we need all kinds of people in this. We need to work together as team players, both teams within our companies, teams within government, but then working in partnerships around, really working in the wider partnership role. So I just encourage people to think this is not like some, I think some people have stereotypes. It's got some hacker behind some cube sitting there by themselves, just throw pizza over the wall. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't some people that are like that in this field of cybersecurity, but there's a lot of teamwork, operation centers or team exercises. You hand things off to the next group. A lot of times it's 7x24 support around the clock, around the globe. It's a global attack surface. So I really want people to think in terms of this isn't just for kind of, people who want to do things alone. It's fine if that's your personality and you want to go there, but we need team players. So I just encourage partnerships as a theme. I know we didn't talk a lot about today, but that's a big part of this is partnerships. I think we're getting some more questions here, John. I don't know if time's going to allow for those.
Oh, yeah, we got some time yet. Let me just jump on one of them I see here, Dan. Somebody's asking, hey, how do I learn about these programs that can help me get into the cybersecurity field? Now, the person has some IT experience to go, hey, I'm trying to re-enter the tech field. The easiest thing I can tell you to do, and I can't give you the exact path because obviously I'm just dealing with a sentence that you've written me here, but please understand you need a friend and you need a mentor and you need a network. So whoever that is for you, wherever you're located, if you're interested to get into vulnerability research, whatever, there are plenty of men and women out there that do this job. They're out on Twitter. Get on LinkedIn, get on Twitter, find out who these people are. Start following who people speak at conferences. Look at the B-Sides conferences that you see going on in the community, DerbyCon, RSA. I mean, and obviously RSA. That's the great granddaddy of them all. In fact, before it was called the RSA conference, I delivered my first paper there, and I was a dumb young kid in IT, and I put together and scratched together a paper, and my first one was rejected. And I begged and I carried on and I did. I finally got one published in 1994. And so that's how I got into this field. So you need to, you got to beat on the door. You got to find, and if you can find somebody in this field, a lot of the men and women I work with in the field are happy to help you. They just need to know who you are. You got to raise your hand. You got to find out who these people are. Reach out to them on LinkedIn. Reach out to them on Twitter. Find a way to connect to the community. And please, I'm going to put in a pitch for ISC Squared. Join us. Become one of our associates. It'll immediately link you to 140,000 professionals worldwide. You want to take a certification and take your job and go work in London for a year or two if you're not there now. Hey, if you want to go work in Tokyo or Australia, go find these people. Become part of this community, and that's the biggest. Dan, is there anything you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I actually did a blog a few years back called "Are You a Security Professional?" and I think it's hard to say. People come from all different backgrounds, like we said earlier in the presentation. I mean, I think local universities, community colleges have cyber programs. A lot of times people want to go back to school. I know, like you said, ISC's got great programs, training, certifications. I think looking at what's going on within your current company, talking to the security pros, talking to the technology professionals about what's going on, how you may be able to get involved right where you're at. But I also think, a lot of times people want to get involved. I've seen people, literally in their 50s and 60s who start cybersecurity as a second career. I've seen people. I don't think it's necessarily bound by you got to be coming out of high school and going into community college. I think people of all ages, all ethnic backgrounds around the world, men and women. We need more women in cybersecurity. We know that, but I think there's a lot of great women leaders right now, and so we need everybody. I mean, it's like all hands on deck. I think if you're passionate, that's why I told the story about Mike. You're passionate and you really, put the time and energy into this, you can enter this field and make a difference. And we need security pros. with all types of backgrounds. So I don't think there's any one solution. I would look at local, information assurance programs or cybersecurity programs or renaming things all the time. But you can come from a traditional tech background. You mentioned your background, John. I actually had a bachelor's and a master's in computer science. That was where I came from, the IT background as well. But a lot of people in our teams that I've led and worked with around the country come from all different, literally insurance salesmen or some. All kinds of different people who've gotten into cybersecurity. So I don't think there's any. The sky's the limit. I think we'll probably make some of this available for people. Websites where they can go. Maybe you can give them a website, John, where they can go to learn more about ISC Squared programs.
Well, sure, and obviously somebody's even asking me here, hey, can I become an associate member at ISC Squared? The answer is yes. How do you do that? Go to isc2.org. Take a look. It's right there, on our website. Tells you how to become a member, how to join, and we look forward to having you on board. In fact, I will give you your PIN and welcome you and hug you when you get on board because we want you, we need you. Somebody else is asking, what employers offer apprenticeships? Again, this is one of those, it's a big, big question. And again, I can give you, hey, I know Fred Jones at Raytheon, and they do these apprenticeships. And then you're going to go, oh, but I don't want to live in Laurel, Maryland. I live in Seattle. See, I can't answer that question, because I'd go right through the ringer with trying to do that in specific cases. So I would invite you to reach out in many local communities. One, they're running B-Sides conferences. There's ISACA meetings. We have chapter meetings. I speak at a lot of them. I just spoke to the one in Baltimore recently. I'm headed to the one in Central Georgia coming up in 1 week. I'll be down there speaking for them. We go, there's Central Florida, there's Southern, there's 3 or 4 major ones in Florida. We're global. So reach out and go to one of their meetups. They'll give you a cup of coffee and a slice of pizza. Happy to have you. It's not going to cost you anything. I would just encourage you to make these connections, ask these questions. I can't answer them, for a global audience here that's on this call. I can't just say, yeah, go see this person at this company because it may not be a match for you. But I will tell you they're out there, they're available, and it's just simply a matter of continuing to kick down the door as Mike did for Dan until Dan finally relented. There's a discussion about regulation about social media companies. Do you see government regulation around cybersecurity companies? The answer is I have no idea. I worked for many years in the federal government. I'd be at a loss to tell you what they're going to do tomorrow. You have legislative issues that are being addressed, but I can tell you the federal government's searching as much as companies are for that talent and for the people to help them make decisions. I had the privilege of going in and meeting with staffers on Capitol Hill and working with the Congressional Cyber Caucus and as well as the Homeland Security Committees and helping them draft legislation. And the biggest thing we do is we just try to help them use the words correctly. Here I just got a government survey, people, that says, how do you keep up with threat? And I go, if you're dealing with threat, you already failed. And this is a question they're asking. So going back to these, high-level government and helping them understand what business we're in, why it's important and how to do it is just critical. So, one of the things I did when I came on this job, I just want to tell you real quick, I started doing lexicons. I've got one, there's 2 of them published already. There's the Basic Cybersecurity Lexicon, and then there's the Industrial Control Systems one. And you can find them, just look for Advocates Corner on our website, click on my name, they're right there on the website. And I've got one for IoT coming out in the next month. So those are the 3 lexicons, and they're just a little brochure. And I give those to lawyers, legislators, and journalists. Say, before you write about this stuff, make sure you're using the right language. So we're addressing that from the government. We need your help. You're part of the government. We have a government in the U.S. that endeavors to represent the people. And so as one of the people, we encourage you to get involved in that and keep track of that. I think as best I can address that. Would you recommend which are innovating in cybersecurity, not just dealing with threats? You know what? There's a lot of great work going on. I can list a lot of these companies. Dan listed a couple of great ones too. Tenable, that CEO of that is an old friend of ours, Dan and mine. His name is Amit Uran. We have Duo Security, which is out of Michigan, which is, again, has great men and women that work there, Wendy Nather and others, that you can reach out to, and you see the incredible work they're doing. Not to mention they're still the large contractors for the government that have innovative cyber groups. They're usually smaller teams within these larger companies that are doing wonderful, wonderful work. And so, work with NIST. Go follow NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. Look up a guy named Dr. Ron Ross, somebody I've known for 30 years. This man and his teams at NIST are doing incredible work with defining what makes cybersecurity organizations more effective, how they work, and they develop standards around them. I'm sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to just get chatty on that.
No, you're good. This is great. I mean, I just want to jump right back. One other quick thing earlier. I mean, John said, he had no idea about the regulation. I would just say a couple things that are happening right now. FedRAMP is becoming almost a de facto kind of, cloud security thing for government work, and not just federal government. I mean, more and more state governments are requiring FedRAMP certification. So if you want to, Google that, FED-RAMP, R-A-M-P, FedRAMP. You can read about their programs and what that means. And, FedRAMP compliance, if you're in the federal government, you know all about FedRAMP. But, I mean, I think, that's just one example. But I think, the reality of it is that people do want, more and more people want, kind of, easy checklist. I don't know that there's ever going to be, you have to be, quote unquote, as a company, the government's going to say, what does it mean to be a certified security company? And maybe within some specific area like, forensics or some specific skill set, what does it mean? Obviously, there's a police, law enforcement, that background, John, what it means to do forensics in different environments and things. So I think those kind of standards and those kind of skill sets will be out there, and the government can help. I don't know if there's ever going to be a one-off, stamp of approval for cyber company, because I think one of the things that is a challenge is it's constantly moving, it's constantly evolving, and I mean, there's a lot of debate right now, even with the whole GDPR thing. How much privacy regulation will we have in the United States versus what we're seeing, adopted in Europe? These are huge talk topics. As John mentioned, go to RSA. There'll be 20 talks on just GDPR, different aspects of privacy, and what may or may not happen around the world at different countries. But I think the reality of it is, regardless of that, we're seeing some standards in some specific areas like cloud. But that's why you need to get into the cybersecurity field, because more areas are coming open all the time. New topics, artificial intelligence, autonomous vehicles, autonomous cars. Go on and on and on, drones, and all of these different new technologies and innovations have new cybersecurity challenges, right? So we need people in all of those areas to be cybersecurity certified and really to help. And it's going to be very hard for the government to keep up with this. So I think it's going to be an evolving field.
Absolutely. I got a couple of final questions I'm being asked. People are going hey, I didn't see a button where I can just join ISC Squared. The answer is you can't. There's no such thing. It's a process. So take a look at what that process entails. You're going to be taking a very difficult test. This is something you aspire to. This isn't something you just sit in the background, join, and then do this. This is an opportunity for you to start building your career, building the framework for your career, and then filling in the various things. So take a look at some of the specifics on what that is. And no, you don't have to have the certification, but understand the certification you get from ISC Squared is an ANSI standard. So this is not something where you just get, take 40-hour course and get a certification. That's called a certificate. This certification requires 5 years of experience. Ethics thing involves a lot of knowledge and involves an extremely difficult exam. So want you to have this part of the thing, but understand that this is a great way to start building your career, is to find out what those steps are to get your certification and start taking a walk. I'll tell you what I did. When I was in high school, I was an honor student. Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor. That won't happen again, Your Honor. And then when I decided years later I was going to go back to college when I was in the military, I ended up putting a big poster on my refrigerator that showed where I was today, and it listed all the courses, the semesters, everything I had to take to get my undergrad degree. And I sat there, that hung on my refrigerator until I had my bachelor's degree. I did then the same thing when I went back and got an MBA. It took 3 years to get an MBA. That was a very difficult program, but that went on the refrigerator. Make yourself up a chart like that. Start marking those off and start building your career. Hey, we're up against the time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Great job.
Oh, enjoyed it very much, and I'll turn this over to our colleagues at RSA.
Great. Thank you so much, Dan and John, for a great presentation. And thanks to all of you for joining us for this RSA Conference virtual session. We hope you will join us in San Francisco from March 4th to 8th for RSA Conference 2019. Registration is now open, so for more information and to register, please visit rsaconference.com. Thank you. You may now disconnect.